Hello there. I am who I am. Food for thought. Oh, not food for thought, it's food for the heart. And yes, I'm a bit tipsy, so that's why I'm getting all my words mixed up. I had such a stressful day, I've just downed a glass of Baileys. But yeah, I wanted to talk about when love becomes dependence. I've already done a video on why I'm stressed today, so I'm not going to do another one. I think I did it on the biblical translator. So, Lady Loy, that's me. You can catch me every Friday on Lovers Rock Radio 7 till 9 or Saturday on Gold Standard Radio 7 till 9. So, let's talk about dependence. So, first, let me acknowledge you and say good morning, good afternoon, and good night, everyone, depending on which part of the world you are listening to me on. I'd like to spend a little time thinking about something that can happen so gradually we don't even notice it. It starts with love, with kindness, with wanting to be there for someone. But somewhere along the way, love quietly turns into dependence, and before we know it, one person is carrying far more than the relationship was ever meant to ask of them. Now, let's be clear from the beginning, there is nothing wrong with needing each other. That's what relationships are for. We all need support, we need encouragement, we need to have seasons where we are stronger and seasons where we lean on someone else. That's healthy. The problem is when leaning becomes living. When one person slowly becomes responsible for the other person's happiness, confidence, decisions, finances, friendships, emotions, and sometimes even their sense of purpose. Without meaning to, one person becomes the engine and the other becomes the passenger. And because it doesn't happen overnight, we often don't see it happening. Let me just turn that off. Sorry about that. Um, it usually begins with the small things. I'll do that for you. Don't worry, I'll sort it. I'll make that phone call. I'll deal with that bill. I'll remind you. I'll organise it. One thing becomes another and another until one day you realise you've become somebody else's memory, diary, alarm clock, accountant, personal assistant, and emotional support team all rolled into one. You know that sort of thing. You ask, did you book the appointment? They say, I thought you were going to do it. You smile because you've heard those words so many times you almost answer them before they finish speaking. Somewhere between caring and coping, you've accidentally applied for a full-time job that nobody advertised. Now we can smile at that because many of us recognise it, but underneath it is a serious question. What happened? How did two adults slowly become one adult carrying two lives? I think one reason is that helping people feels good. We all like feeling useful. There's something satisfying about solving a problem, especially when it's someone we love. And there's the thing. If we're always solving every problem, the other person never has the opportunity to discover what they're capable of solving themselves. Sometimes our helping delays someone's growing. And that's quite difficult thought because our intentions are usually good. We think we're making life easier. Sometimes we are. Sometimes we're making dependence more comfortable. And that's not the same thing. I remember going to a seminar and the man said, I think it was Brian Tracy, he said, never help somebody unless they've asked you to. Because humans have a tendency to rescue. I remember hearing someone say that if you keep carrying a person's backpack, eventually they forget they have shoulders. I thought that was quite profound, not because they're lazy, but because people naturally adapt to whatever someone else consistently does for them. Have you ever noticed how quickly that happens? The first time you make your partner a cup of tea, they say, oh, thank you so much. 6 months later, you walk into the kitchen, put the kettle on without even thinking, and somehow they're calling you from the other room, my one's got sugar. You stand there laughing to yourself because you can't actually remember the meeting where you accepted responsibility for tea production for the rest of your natural life. Little routines quietly become expectations, and expectations, if we're not careful, become entitlement. Now, before anyone starts pointing at their husband or wife or partner, I think it's worth asking ourselves another question. Why do we keep doing it? Because sometimes it isn't just the other person who becomes dependent. Sometimes we become dependent on being needed. That's a much harder truth to face if our identity comes from rescuing, fixing, and holding everything together. Then letting go can feel frightening. We wonder whether we'll still be valued if we're not constantly useful. That's an uncomfortable question because our worth should never depend on how indispensable we make ourselves. Healthy love says, I choose to walk beside you. Dependency says, I can't function unless you're carrying me. Those are very different relationships. One is partnership, the other is imbalance. The Bible gives us a beautiful picture of people carrying one another's burdens, but carrying someone's burden isn't the same as carrying their whole life. There's wisdom in knowing the difference, because sometimes the kindest thing we can do is step back just enough to allow someone else to take responsibility for what's theirs. Not because we've stopped loving them, but because we do. I think we also need to be honest about what happens when one person carries too much for too long. Resentment quietly moves in. Not all at once, it arrives a little at a time. You begin doing things with a sigh instead of a smile. You stop asking for help because you've convinced yourself it's easier to do it yourself. Then one day you're empty and the other person is completely surprised because from their point of view, everything seemed to be working perfectly. Of course it did. They didn't realise one person was paying the emotional bill for both of them. Here's another little moment that might sound familiar. You're both leaving the house. You've got your own keys, your bag, your shopping list, and somehow you're also checking whether they've got their phone, their wallet, their glasses, their medication, their train ticket. Halfway down the road, you'll find yourself asking, have you actually got your shoes on? They look down and laugh and say yes, then you laugh too, because for a split second you genuinely wondered whether check-in had become necessary. It's amusing, but it's also tiring, because when we carry responsibility that belongs to someone else, our minds never really switch off. We're always checking, always remembering, always anticipating, and eventually that takes its toll. Jesus loved people deeply, but he never took responsibility for choices that belonged to someone else. He invited, he taught, he encouraged, but people still had to decide. That's healthy reminder to all of us, our free will. Love does not mean taking over another person's life. It means walking with them while respecting that they too have a life to live. Perhaps that's the one of the greatest gifts we can give someone. Not doing everything for them, but believing they are capable of doing some things for themselves. That's respect, that's trust, that's love, and healthy boundaries. So perhaps today's food for the heart is this. Ask yourself whether your relationship feels like two people walking together or one person carrying the other. And if you discover you've been carrying more than your share, don't feel guilty. Just being gently allow the other person to rediscover their own strength. Allow yourself to rediscover your own peace, because love isn't measured by how much of yourself you lose. Love is measured by how well two people help one another become the people God created them to be. And perhaps that's what healthy love has been trying to teach us all along. Take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and I'll speak to you again soon. So please do that, won't you? You'll just check to make sure you're not carrying more than your share. Make sure you're not micromanaging, and make sure you're not anticipating the worst case scenario and fixing it before it happens. And that's all I've got to say for now. Like I said, take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and I'll speak to you soon. Bye-bye.